Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming. At this time, I'd like to call the meeting of the April 24 Shellfish Advisory Committee, April 24, 2024, call the meeting to order. And I'd like to begin by taking a roll call. So as I read your name, if you'd indicate whether you're here or not. Robert Davis, yes. John Gary.
Here.
Barry Greco.
Here.
Jeff Hayner. John Kenaway.
Here.
Pat Vreeland.
Here.
Thank you very much. We do have a quorum, so let's continue. And at this time, could I ask John Gary to read our mission statement, please?
Yeah, the Shellfish Advisory Committee evaluates the best means to develop the shellfish potential of the town by promoting a sustainable resource through propagation, sound management, and by supporting efforts to preserve and protect shellfish habitat.
Thank you very much. Everyone received a copy of the minutes of the last meeting, I assume. Are there any corrections to those minutes? If there are none, could I have a motion that they be accepted?
I'll make motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion to approve the minutes is carried. Thank you. We're now at the point in our agenda where this would normally be the place for public comment. I'm going to suspend that particular aspect of it and instead ask any residents of Chatham who would like to make a comment to do so later in our agenda during the time where the committee is deliberating, to give the committee members an opportunity to engage with anyone who would like to speak. So if you would like to make a comment, simply raise your hand and you'll be recognized. If we miss you first time, don't worry, everyone's going to have an opportunity to make their remarks. But when you're recognized, if you'd come to the podium, please, and state your name, and if you'd indicate the context in which you're here, that is, are you a shellfisherman, a boater, a property owner, you get the idea, just to give us a sense of your role. I'm not going to put a time limit on any of the presentations of the public. I'd ask you to keep it succinct and to the point. We all sort of know when somebody goes on too long. If that happens, I'll ask you to wrap it up. And the other thing I would say is some of you may not have been to a Shellfish Advisory Committee meeting before, but we are a civil committee. We respect one another. We respect the opinions of others, even if we disagree with them. So my expectation is that's the way our meeting will proceed today. Also, I'd like to add that, at least in my view, it's not clear where this meeting is going to go. I can't tell exactly how many people would like to speak. As I said, everyone will have an opportunity. And if we run out of time, this meeting may go on to next month. We don't know. On the other hand, we could wrap things up and it may result in action or it may not result in action. So I just wanted to make sure there were no expectations, but the meeting will be conducted properly and everyone will have a fair hearing. With that, let's go on to our new business. And the first item is an agenda item that I requested, and that is I'm asking permission from the committee to speak on behalf of the committee, or have the option of speaking on behalf of the committee at the town meeting relative to Article 18, which is a waterfront bond issue. I cannot just stand up and speak unless I have prior authorization from the committee. So at this time, I'm asking for a motion giving me the option to speak on your behalf at the town meeting. Is there a motion?
Are we going to see, Mr. Chair, what you've written?
It'll be extemporaneously. I couldn't possibly write anything. It'll represent the views of this committee,
Okay.
I can assure you that.
I don't have an issue.
Is that a motion?
Motion, yeah.
I'll second it.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Thank you very much. The next item is our department update. So Renee, could you give us your comments?
Yes, thank you. Not much to report this month. Thank you. Not much to report this month, other than commercial permits do expire next week on Tuesday. And for those of you who have actually purchased your commercial permit for this year, you received the new edict from the state saying that you need to put all of the numbers on your seller's tags. I just want to make a distinction that it's important to put those numbers on your tags, but you don't need to put it in when you're writing your catch report on your safest reports, because those are two different entities. One is for public health and traceability, and the other is the safest reports is just for landings and catch. So if you can't plug in those numbers, that's why, because safest doesn't care about those numbers, but the state does. And a lot of that stems from a couple of years ago when we had to reclassify areas with a lot of moorings. A lot of those areas, like especially in Stage Harbor, we have sub-areas, and so that's why the state wants you to make sure that you put those sub-numbers on your seller's tags. And that's it for me.
Okay, any questions for Renee? Great. That brings us to the main order of business, which is to consider supporting the repeal of Shellfish Regulation Section 401, Section F. Shellfish Grant Policy, Town of Chatham does not issue aquaculture leases for any area within the Town of Chatham. I'm going to start the proceedings by going through the committee and alphabetically asking you if you have any comments. And then after you've made comments, I'll invite any members of the public, any residents of Chatham, to make their comments. I invite you to engage with them, ask questions, so we have an open, honest discussion about the subject. So let me start, if I may, with John Gary. Do you have any comments at this point?
I have not any real comments. I just think it's a proper time, I think, to bring the subject up. And I think it was brought up a number of years ago, and I think it's another good time to bring it up. I am personally in favor of aquacultural grants. I believe, as environmental changes continue to occur in the area, and as shellfish are going to be more and more under an impact of environmental conditions, I think we may find that it's going to be far, far better to keep track of the shellfish habitats and everything by having grants where they can be managed better. And I just also believe that even from the point of view of the commercial shellfishermen and fishermen in the town, that I just see the population of the shellfishermen in Chatham getting older and older and older, and I see very few younger people getting into that fishery whatsoever. And I would think that maybe with issuing of grants and so forth, where they can be a little bit entrepreneurial and get into it and can make a decent living out of it, it might help the town a lot and help a lot of the commercial fishermen stay in the town instead of having to move out and find other jobs. So that's all of my comment right now.
Thank you, John. Barry Greco.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to recuse myself on a possible conflict of interest.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do we still have a quorum?
John Kennaway?
Do we still have a quorum?
I'm sorry?
Do we still have a quorum?
I still couldn't.
Do we have a quorum still?
Oh, we do.
Okay.
Well, the quorum exists at the beginning of, so once the quorum is established at the beginning, it runs all the way through the meeting, so we're fine.
I think it's time to examine this again. We have no youth in our fishery, in the shell fishery. And I think it's time to go over this.
Any other comments?
No.
Okay, thank you. Pat Vreeland?
Yes, I agree. I really would like to see us supporting our local shellfish industry in any way. And I think it's time. We did look at it a couple of years ago, and it looked like the management part of it might have been a big concern, and I'm anxious to hear about that. But I do feel like we should be open-minded and take a look at what the opportunities might be for our local people. Because I know people that are working in other grants outside of the town that live in Chatham, and I'd like to see the more the merrier, get some benefit from this.
Thank you very much. I've asked Renee, our shellfish constable, to help me identify those people that have raised their hands. She's a little bit closer, so be patient with me if you would. Are there any people in the audience, residents of Chatham, that would like to speak? I saw a first hand go up here. Again, if you please identify yourself.
Name's Barry Homer. I'm a shell fisherman. Grants are allowed in this town. They're allowed out in Nantucket Sound. There's been few approved. Back in the day, Mark Sinomich wanted to put a grant out there, which was approved. He wanted to do sea scallops. The Eldridges wanted to do mussels back in the day, and that was approved. We have a seaweed farm out in the Sound. So that's area that can be utilized to have grants. Why they're not allowed inshore is because we're taking away public land for a private individual. How many recreational licenses are there? How many commercial licenses are there? That's why we didn't really want to have grants inside, but there's plenty of bottom out in the Sound for people to do whatever they want to grow. That's all I got to say.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you very much. I saw another hand go up a few moments ago. Over there, please.
My name's Will Nicolai. I'm a commercial fisherman in town. I actually worked at Chatham Shellfish Company for 3 years. It kind of got me through COVID. I'm 20, so I was working there in high school. And I think it would be a great idea to get more grants. Obviously, aquaculture is good for the water. Oysters can purify the water. So I guess I'm just a voice of support as a young person trying to make a living here. So I think it would be a good idea to have some more grants, or however many you guys want. But yeah.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Thank you very much. I saw a hand on the aisle, looks like, in the back.
Hello, my name's Rolf Abreu. I'm a shell fisherman right now. I'm totally against any kind of grants, any more new grants inside the harbor of the town. I agree with the previous speaker that if you want to have grants, have them out in the Sound. There are many multitudes of users in our town that never existed before. The kayakers, the stand-up paddle boarders, all kinds of uses like that. If you see Richard's grant at low tide, it looks like an abandoned homeless shack out in the middle of a bunch of turds floating in the water. And I don't think any vista in this town should have to be forced to experience that. And if the Shellfish Board want to support something like that, I think this should go to town meeting, where a lot of the people that are going to be affected by this, other than shellfishermen, should have a say in this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just for the record and clarity, this committee is, as its name indicates, an advisory committee. So we do not make policy. We simply listen to what the community has to say and then make recommendations when appropriate to the select board. Other speakers? Is there a hand up there? Please.
Mike Beckard. I've been a fisherman in town for almost my whole life. It's too long. But a comment that Barry made about having these grants even in the sound outside of the harbor. You gotta remember, like in the 80s, that had come up, 2 or 3 people wanted grants on the flats, so like West Flat, all those flats. The same year, we ended up having like 2 or 3 years of the most amazing sea clam set that we've ever had. We had 30 guys going 200 bushels a day, regular fishermen. We didn't need a grant. If it would have been, those grants would have been put there, we would have been out of that, all those clams and acreage of shellfish that everybody used. And it went through the towns and everybody, the whole thing. This happened like 2 or 3 different times. Up north, right where the break is now, before that break, somebody wanted to put 2 or 3 people wanted grants up along the inside shore of the North Beach. Cassie was our shellfish warden at that time, and she refused to do it. But she did go with the town, set some soft shell clams there under nets and stuff, which kind of wasn't successful at the time. The predators and everything, and it was a new thing. Few years ago, the same thing happened. The break came. They had a set of clams in there that took care of 300 or 400 people, and lot of money for everybody, not just, a half a dozen people working on it and stuff. People are not from town, because a lot of people that are working on these grants are not even in town. They're students and stuff like that. I appreciate that, with young people learning shellfishing. But I don't believe that we need grants anywhere in town. Nowhere, even in the deep water. You got cohogs over there. If the kid wanted to learn how to catch them things, they can catch them and they'll make a good living. And I refuse any grants anywhere in town. Thank you.
Thank you. I see another hand, at least one. If you come to the podium, please.
I'm a commercial fisherman. I've spent...
I'm sorry, could you repeat your name again, please?
Oh, Ted Lagenza.
Thank you.
I'm a commercial fisherman. I spent half my life fishing and half my life shell fishing. And when the fishing wasn't good, I went shell fishing. And when the fishing was good, I went fishing. If I got a windy day and when my family was young, I'd go shell fishing to make some extra money for the family. And many times, not anymore, I don't have a crew anymore, but I still have my boat. I have a crew, and a crew would go out fishing with me, and then we'd have 2 or 3 bad days. He says, I want to go cohogging. I said, yeah, go ahead. I'll go by myself. In a couple of days, I'd find a load of fish, call him up on the phone, he'd be back. He didn't have to quit because he had something else to do. I was in Dennis with my wife stopping at a mechanic's place, and I says, these fishermen that live in Harwich and Dennis and Yarmouth, they have to have a lot of money to go fishing because they don't have good shell fishing, especially in Harwich. So if you have a lobster business and you're having a rough time and you need money, you gotta sell the boat. But if you live in Chatham and you're a fisherman and you run into hard times, everybody knows what you do. Oh, you went cohogging, you went clamming for a year. So if you want to turn the town into aquaculture, you're going to end that lifestyle in Chatham. Somebody mentioned Mark Simonich. I was driving back with him. We had 12 guys in the boat. We had Lotus Cup. I know that doesn't happen now. And Mark says, Ted, the thing about Chatham is when something good happens fishing like this, we get a whole crew of guys that are all shell fishermen. They all get on the boat and go to work. And I can call them up on the phone and get them. And this core of fishermen is here because of shellfishing. So I'm dead set against grants. And I'll tell you what, another reason, I had a bad experience with it because I was 22 years old, maybe 23 when they put that grant in an oyster pond, and I was cohogging there. I could make $20 there. That was big money back then. I could never go there again. And then I found out I could walk around the place, but there was rumor you couldn't walk in the grant, so I had to walk around on land, and I went the other side. Well, 3 or 4 years ago, I says, you know, I can go back, roll around it, and check it out. And lo and behold, they had the buoys around it, so I couldn't go there anymore. When they make a grant, you're never going to go shellfishing there again. And that's why some of us older fishermen don't like it, because we've experienced it. But, you know, you're just going to change the nature of the town. And there's still people fishing in Chatham, and they still need crews. And most of their crews all go shellfishing in the winter. I know one lobsterman, all of a sudden, this kid showed up in a tin skiff. He brought a couple quahog rakes, and he was a crew in one of the boats. And he decided he'd learn how to shellfish, and he was there this winter. He's young. And I think that people are worried about just having old people shellfishing. But I think that if the shellfishing gets better, and it very well can down Monomoy, it's taking off, then the young guys will come. And the whole bunch of guys 10 years younger than me all showed up, and they were the new group of fishermen. So if we have anything good happen in town, we can keep our wild fishery. I think you guys are making a giant mistake wanting to have grants in town. I think it'd be really bad for the fishing community.
Thank you for your comments.
Yeah, you're welcome. I wouldn't have been able to succeed fishing if I didn't have shellfishing, and I've actually done quite well doing both. But I would have done okay shellfishing the whole time, but I would have had a real hard time fishing because I wouldn't have been able to go, because that's what we all did. We did 2 jobs at once, and it was a good thing.
Thank you again.
You're welcome.
Do we have another speaker? Yes.
Andy Young, Cashfinger Road, North Chatham. Recreational shell fisherman, recreational fin fisherman, do a bunch of other things, but in any case, love being in Chatham and been here for a long time, year-round since 1981. I've known quite a few of the commercial shell fishermen in town since then, and many of them have expressed a similar opinion as with Teddy Lagenza. When fishing didn't otherwise work out, shell fishing was always in their back pocket. And we've had a long history of a wild shellfish industry. And it would be a shame to lock that up in a whole series of grants. I think that's why the deep water grants were the only things that were really entertained, because it's kind of tough to go out there and be in water over your head and go shell fishing, except maybe for scallops or sea clams. But there's a, you know, it's a conundrum to me why, you know, we would even, well, I shouldn't say that. We should be considering it. We should be looking at it carefully and trying to measure the harm it might do to the wild shell fishery in town versus the benefits that we think we could get from it. We have hundreds of commercial shell fishermen. We have many hundreds of recreational shell fishermen. We are about to spend a lot of money on a new shellfish upwelling system. Who's that going to benefit for? It certainly is funded in part by licensing fees, but I'm presuming, unless things are going to undergo a dramatic change, most of the work product out of that is going to go into the wild shell fishery, and we need to be able to protect that. So I get a little worried about that. I think that certainly our history on the east side of town is that, as somebody earlier said, could be a shellfish hotspot today, and the next time we get an easterly and it gets sanded over, well, not that day, and maybe not for a year or two, but eventually it could easily come back. That's one of my big concerns is the existing shellfish grant that we have inshore. Essentially, as far as I can tell, is practically speaking there in perpetuity. And the likelihood of that bottom ever becoming open to the public again, I'd say is minimal. And I certainly haven't heard anything so far to the contrary, and that would be a shame as well. Attracting other people into the shellfishing industry, if young people come or don't come to town for a whole panoply of reasons. Some of them might be the opportunity to work in a shellfish grant, but many of them might also be because they just plain old can't afford a house or an apartment or can't find a place to rent. Or a spouse is working in town, but they can find work in a different town, and they want to do that. It's hard to tag shellfish grants as I think as a major attractant for younger people. Shellfishing is hard work. I watch the commercial guys I know that are out there, and they certainly aren't. They may be having a good time by their terms, but most of it go, oh God, that looks like it hurts. And that's something that would have to be overcome for young people. Anyway, that's what I had to say. I've been before this committee before, you may remember, a couple of years ago, saying, shellfish grants are going to be a hot topic. And I think as this becomes more publicized, more folks who enjoy the wild shell fishery are going to start turning up and saying, we need to preserve this, rather than trying to figure out how to take public bottom and devote it to a private enterprise. That's a major issue for me. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? Please come up.
Mike Anderson, commercial fisherman, 50 years or so. I'm reiterating what Teddy said. We've always counted on this, but there's also other things. There's no equitable way of distributing grants. It just makes a haves and have-not situation. If you look at Wellfleet, a handful of people own the bottom and nobody else can fish. If you allow that to happen here, you're making a huge mistake, because this has been a traditional wild fishery, the last one probably on the Cape. And you have to allow it to keep going. It's an attractant for people. If you make this into a haves and have-not situation, you are making it impossible for anybody else, because you can't equitably give away bottom. There's hundreds of fishermen here. If you're going to give it away, you got to give it away to everybody, not just 2 or 3 or 4 people. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. A hand over here. Yes, please.
Hi, Dominic Santoro, commercial fisherman, shell fisherman, Chatham property owner. I think it's time to look at shellfish aquaculture again. I think we're probably the only coastal town that doesn't have aquaculture at this point, and I think we're missing out on opportunities to not only just have part-time income from, perceived wild fisheries, but we have opportunity for people to really make a living and be able to stay in this town. I mean, you're not going to make enough money participating in the wild fisheries to come to this town as a young person, or for someone's children to stay in this town with the cost of living. But I think with the aquaculture lease, it is possible. I know it's possible because people are doing it all over the southeast Massachusetts. I think it needs to be looked at carefully. I wouldn't advise giving away bottom that's on the tidal flat or intertidal, but there's a lot of different methods of aquaculture now. There's a lot of water up in Pleasant Bay where, you know, some maybe aquaculture that you have to use from a boat can be growing oysters and stuff. There's other opportunities than just on, you know, flats, which people are worried about. And I don't think it has to be an either or. I don't think we have to do away with the commercial fisheries, you know, I mean, the wild fisheries, which are actually subsidized, you know, a lot by the propagation program, but it doesn't have to be an either or situation. I think there's time to at least take a look at it and see if there's an opportunity to do some aquaculture grants in this town.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Okay, thank you very much. Well, thank you all for your comments. Before we continue our discussion, I'd like to call on our Shellfish Constable to certainly enlighten me and maybe some of the audience as to the current status of things. And I'll explain why I'm making this request. We're an advisory committee, as I said earlier. I don't want to be, as a committee member, I don't want to simply kick the issue upstairs, which I could easily do, and then have the select board deal with it. So I'd like to make a decision on this issue based on the facts today, but also trying to understand what that means going forward, what the process would be if the select board did undertake this thing. So could you help me understand what the regulations are, and maybe you don't know, I know you're not an attorney, but maybe you could help us understand what the regulations are, how many there could be, where they would be. That would help me in understanding the merits of this.
Well, I don't know if I can go into that kind of detail. I mean, currently there is a prohibition on the books and in our regulations. It was adopted in the early 1990s for some of the reasons that were brought up. There was a big surge in wanting grants in the early 90s, and I think a lot of people here probably even remember better than I do. It was the equity aspect of it and how to equitably divide up that land to the people who were actually commercial harvesters and had permits. So they thought that the best approach was to place this prohibition. Since that time, these types of meetings have come up periodically to review that prohibition. There were a couple of attempts to do the subtitle aquaculture grants, as previously mentioned. Those were considered to be experimental because there was still a prohibition on the books, and also, I'm going to go back in time and correct myself. Those were actually tentatively approved, but they were on existing WEIR grants, and there was precedents set with Mark Simonich that you could change the use of those WEIR grants to an aquaculture grant. So based on that precedent set that was before the actual prohibition was in place, there was a couple of attempts to convert some of the WEIR grants into an aquaculture grant. So it wasn't that they were permitted as grants, they were a conversion of an existing WEIR grant. But there was never really any follow-through afterwards. So whether or not that is a possibility, you know, we don't know. But I guess that's it. Like I said, the tentative support for the subtitle aquaculture grants were a conversion. It was not the elimination or the possibility of permitting other grants. That would need to be addressed through consideration of the current prohibition on the books. The prohibition on the books is a blanket prohibition for all waters in Chatham. And again, the ones that had tentative support were a conversion of WEIR grants. And I think that brings us up to date.
Thank you, but the second part of my question had to do going forward, that if the select board did consider this, I mean, I heard people comment about public waters, stuff like that. Where would they go? What are the guidelines on where you can put such a project?
Well, I really hate to suppose what the Select Board would task my department with. I work as their agent. They are the ultimate authority in town. They would be the authority that would make the decision on whether that prohibition was lifted or in what conditions that prohibition was lifted. I certainly could give some guidance if that is the approach and the avenue that the Select Board decide to take. It's not just this prohibition. There are certain there's certain conditions that the state would require for converting public lands into private entity, and one of them is that the land cannot be productive. So lands that currently have shellfish on that would not be allowed to be permitted under the state's guidance.
How far back in time would that go? Is that current or back
They
in
would,
time?
they do take a look at history, John, and I think that if there's not currently a substantial population there, that would be a conversation between the town and the state. But they don't do blanket surveys for towns. For instance, if the town was considering this and asked for an assessment of lands throughout the town, the state would not do just a blanket survey. They do a permit-by-permit survey, meaning that there has to be an actual proposal on their desk before they actually survey an area. So determining for us what areas are productive or not would be a supposition unless, you know, we hire divers and assess the whole of Chatham. We can concretely say certain areas are productive. And those would be off the table for the state. So just for clarity, and if you kind of to think about how much area we have, if areas are productive, they're off the table. Most of Monomoy is owned by Fish and Wildlife Service, and most of it is designated as a wilderness. So private commercial enterprise would not be allowed within those boundaries. So that's additional territory off the table. So, I mean, as far as guidance, that's what if people can picture cutting out Monomoy, cutting out productive area, and then kind of envisioning what's left over. Does that make any sense?
Yes, that was very helpful. Thank you. So with that, is there? Yes, please, come to the podium. And again, if you could identify yourself, please.
My name's Ralph Abreu, and the question I have for the shellfish warden, does she have any knowledge of what happens to a wild fishery if contaminated products are brought into the town? How does that affect, does she have any knowledge of how it's affected other areas where there are grants?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Yeah, I was going to ask
Ricky.
you to put it in layman's terms, because I didn't understand it either.
If somebody brings in contaminated products, would that be off the table, or if somebody brings in contaminated products by accident, does she have any knowledge of this happening to other towns and how it affects their wild fishery?
You mean if they're bringing in contaminated product for a particular grant?
Whether it's by accident or design.
Well, I will say that there is a big layer of oversight, especially for aquaculture grants.
Okay.
Everything has to be permitted, even for us as a town. If we want to move product from one water body to another, we have to send it out to a pathology test to make sure the shellfish itself is not diseased. That is going to be, that's part of a aquaculture's permit, that they have to have safe and sound product coming in. Of course, they have to also maintain that product because, I mean, it's farming and they're live animals, and so they have to take care of that product so that it doesn't affect its surrounding, natural environment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
But there is an oversight to aquaculture, and it's fairly rigid.
So back to the committee. Comments from the committee?
Well, I mean, for me, this is very clarifying. The last time we discussed this, we talked about the equity piece, which I think is very important, and I also feel like it seems like a big management issue that we may not want to be involved in. I'm surprised that we're hearing, I'm surprised to hear the negativity from the fishing community. And I think as a layperson and just a personal shellfishing person, I'm learning that it seems to me this might not work for our community, where the opportunity, is there a way to do it where it is limited and it's not preferential? I mean, how do you apply? If 50 people apply, I don't know, that's my concern, is that the whole equity piece, and is there a way to make it fair for everybody?
Other,
And I don't know whether there's an answer to that. I don't think there probably is.
thank you.
Well, obviously, the comments from the public are very negative at this point in time. I think agriculture has a place, but obviously it's not stomachable at this point in time, it seems.
I think it's not an either-or sort of thing here. I think you can still make it available to people that want to apply for a grant, and not necessarily that it's going to take away the wild fishery. I think the wild fishery will remain. As the wild fishery decreases, which I think it will with the environment the way it's going, and I think even all sorts of fisheries will, not just shellfish, but all sorts of fisheries are going to be impacted. That I think you should open it up to people to apply for a grant. I think, as Renee has said, it is not going to be allowed in productive areas. So it's going to benefit things that are not productive. Being the equity part of it, I guess if somebody has the drive and desire to put together a proposal and wants to go before and work hard to get a grant, and it doesn't impact the wild fishery and the other things that might, it's not going to be out on the Fish and Wildlife Preserve and so forth, but if they can meet the requirements that need to be met, that I see no reason why a person or 5 people, if they want to suggest an area and put together a proposal and put it before the town and ourselves, why they shouldn't be allowed to. I think that's crazy to say that people can't do that, so I think since the areas they're gonna do it is gonna benefit the town. It's gonna benefit the people that probably will do it. It's gonna benefit the resource, because it's gonna make a area that's not productive. And those clams, oysters, whatever, they have scallops, will spawn, and they'll populate other areas in the wild fishery. So I think it is wrong to be looking at it as an either-or sort of thing. So that's my feeling.
Thank you.
You have a hand up.
Okay, I'm not sure. Yeah, please come forward. We're winding up the discussion here as a committee, so if there are more comments, I would ask you to come forward now to allow us to engage one another.
Mike Pickard again. All of us, most of the older guys over here, fished almost every inch of this town. Deep water, all flats, everywhere. At one time or another, there's nothing there. If someone's gonna put a grant there to grow stuff, that means we can grow stuff. We're spending money on an upweller to get seed, to get every scallops, mussels, everything going with this big building that we're spending millions of dollars on. For us, for all uptown, not just 2 or 3 people that want to put something. I can go anywhere where those guys want to put a grant, and I will catch a shellfish that is suitable to sell and good for our town. These kids got to start working. We got to work this bottom. That's the biggest problem over here. Everybody wants the gravy. I can show you a picture yesterday. Renee saw a picture, and she says, they're all big. Well, they're not going to get no smaller. And this was pure cohogs and 20 feet of water. Now, nobody would even know what they're looking at. And this is terrible. John raked this, Mike rakes it. We're raking 20 feet of water. Most people don't even see it. You know, really got to pay attention. You cannot have anybody take any bottom away from us. Nowhere. In this whole town, every pond, all Pleasant Bay, right to Orleans line. That's where we started in the 70s. It was solid cohogs and scallops. We don't even want to talk about that. Half the young kids haven't even seen a scallop. It's terrible. We got to stop this. Right now, we stopped it in the 80s, and we have to stop it. We have to pay attention to the people that we have left doing this, because we won't be able to do it. And that's all. Thank you, but we got to pay attention to this very, very closely. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments. Again, are there any other members of the public that at this time would like to make an additional comment? Okay, please come up.
I did something wrong the other day.
Could you introduce yourself, please?
Teddy Lagenza. I was out in the oyster pond, and I was rowing back. It was a long row back to the furlong. And I says, I'm pretty tired. I'm just going to row across the Grant. They can't get mad about that. And there's these plastic things all over that they have shellfish in. And by the way, they wash up all over in the oyster pond. But I'm looking in the water, and I'm like, what are these pieces of rope with knots in them? And I couldn't figure out what the hell it was. Well, they had, eventually I found out the hard way, they were steel rods with pieces of metal on top of the steel rods, and other pieces of metal, so it was like this grid of steel in the pond. And I ran into it with my skiff, and I was like, Jesus, I was worried that I was going to pop a hole in my skiff. You couldn't even walk here. These grants are places where people can't walk. And if you walked out in the water there, you could get killed. And I don't think that's right. And I was down the fish pier, and somebody comes up to me and he goes, can I walk down the beach here? I says, this is Chatham. I says, if you want to walk down the beach, if you go below the high tide line, you can walk wherever you want. And they went walking down the beach. And I think I felt very good saying that to them, because I went to Rhode Island, and I went to some place, Jeremy Point. I heard of Jeremy Point. I wanted to see it. So we parked the car and started walking, and we looked behind us, and a cop car comes behind our car. And I says, geez, I'm never coming back here again. That was where they have the museum there. But it was very private, you know. Chatham's not that private. It's a good thing.
Thank you for your comments.
You're welcome.
Is there anyone else that would like to comment? Any hands? Okay, thank you. Any other comments from the committee? I haven't made any comment yet, but I wanted to make sure that everyone was heard on the committee. Okay, here are my comments. John, I agree with your point that if a group of people wants to get together and put a plan and go before the select board, they've done the heavy lifting, they've done the research, they've done whatever study is required to see if it's feasible to do a grant in this particular area, a feasibility study, in effect. Our action today, either way, does not preclude that individual or group of people from taking that action, and if they think they've got a saleable plan, to go before the select board. My own position is that I think that's the way it should happen, meaning I think if people who have the financial interest at hand and stand to benefit, they should do the heavy lifting up front and come up with a feasibility study and go to the town and make a proposal rather than just generally saying, and by the way, I respect people's opinion about the merits of more jobs for people, things like that. But this is a very complicated situation, as we understand from Renee. And so you have to be thinking down the road and the complexities of it and who's going to be doing the management and enforcement, et cetera, et cetera. I see this as a big undertaking, and I don't want to be a proponent of that, and I don't want to give my support to that just on a arbitrary basis to give somebody a platform to be able to bring it before the select board, which they could do with or without my support. In addition to that, I have spoken before this committee many times about the protection of public access and public interest. We saw that with our discussions about landings. My feelings translate to this subject as well. I don't know how many grants there would be. There sounds like there wouldn't be a lot. So there are going to be a handful of people that might benefit, and I don't know what the detriment is. I don't know how many people would be denied access to shell fishing or recreational boating, or you fill in the blank. I simply don't know. All those unanswered questions make me not to want to be in favor of asking the select board to reconsider their current position. So if there is a motion, and if the motion is seconded, I would vote against it. Any further discussion?
I feel pretty much the same way in terms of making a decision that seems at this point to be very much against the major part of the shellfish community. And if there's somebody that's out there that is ready to go, let them go. I think they have an opportunity to do it themselves and to go forward. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, yeah.
How do they have a ability to go forward if there is on the book saying you can't have the grants?
Well, they have every right to go before the select board and make whatever request they want, independent of our view. So whatever action we take, they can still do that. And so for example, if you wanted to start a business, you'd come up with a business plan and then go to your investment group or banker and you'd make a presentation. It would work the same way, I would imagine, with the select board.
If there was a law against that business,
Well, they would in effect be asking by the merits of their proposal.
asking that law to be rescinded.
The merits of their proposal would have to be sufficiently valid and meaningful to have the select board reverse their current position. But I'm saying that that's the argument they should be making, because they're the ones who would have to do the due diligence and the studies and.
And I would think that would be the case if there were no laws on the books at all.
I'm not sure I understand your point.
I said, if there was no law saying no grants in Chatham, they would still have to go before the selectmen or anybody and make a presentation. I'm just trying to say, I don't think it's a great thing to have a blanket ruling saying there are no grants in the town of Chatham.
Well, I can't
I
defend
say,
that. It's-
I'm just saying,
this-
don't have that law. That's what this is all about.
It's your prerogative to make a motion
I
to,
mean, that would be my motion, is that we rescind that law. That's not saying there's going to be any grants given.
so is that your motion?
I would make that motion.
Okay, is there a second? I ask again, is there a second?
That's fine.
Hearing no second, I think the issue is tabled, and we would not take any action requesting the select board to rescind the current regulation. Thank you all for coming. I hope everyone felt that they were heard fairly. As to the committee itself, we still have a little business. We need to set the next meeting date. Is there,
If you could take any conversation now, we're still finishing up our meeting.
we're still having
Thank you
our
very
meeting,
much.
please.
It's crazy.
Thank you. Should we consider, given the fact that Barry's not here and we're short, should we consider, let's make a tentative date for our next meeting, given that it might have to be bounced off the people that are not here. How does that sound? And does anyone know the tide?
Excuse me, Barry could actually come back.
Oh,
He's.
I don't know where he
he's
is.
in the audience.
There is right there.
oh, yeah. Do you have the tide, or who typically has the tide? Oh, Ben knows the tide. Looking at roughly a month, right? So we're looking at the month of May. Approximately the week of the 20th. Does that sound right?
Low tide on Wednesday, the 22nd, is around 6:30 in the morning. It'll be morning tides that week.
And that's what day?
Wednesday, the 22nd, that would be low tide, 6:30 a.m.
And so is that date at 3 o'clock okay with everybody then?
Sure.
Good?
Yes.
Okay. So we'll plan that on the May 22nd, 3 o'clock in our little room. Any other comments for future agenda meetings?
Just comment for Renee. Could you give out the dates of the closings of the areas that are open now?
Yes, actually, I'll be going before the Board of Selectmen. So Bucks Creek will be closing May 15th. Mill Creek, Taylor's Pond, Champlain Creek, and Muddy Creek on June 1st, and Oyster Pond closes on July 1st.
Thank you.
Any agenda item requests from the committee at this time? Okay. Thank you. With that, could I have a motion to adjourn?
I so move.
Second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.